And I believe we are officially live. Hello, arty peoples, and welcome to another episode of Jerry's Live. My name is Emmy Klein, your host, and as you can see, we have a swashbuckling friend here with us. Everybody, please welcome Jeff Olson. If you've seen our shows, Jeff's been on several times, and he is amazing. So I'm very excited for the show. It's going to be awesome.
Hello, everybody. Great to be here as always.
So Jeff has a really, really cool show planned for today. We were just talking about all the things he's going to be doing. It's going to be incredible. So before we jump into that, though, I wanted to make sure that everyone knows if you are interested in seeing anything that Jeff is going to be using throughout the show and demoing, make sure to go to the website, JerrysArtarama.com, and type in today's class code, which is JL296. So if you type that into the search bar, the teacher's cart should come up and have everything that Jeff's going to be using, so you guys can check it out there. So without further ado, though, I'm going to hand it off to you, Jeff, and get
Awesome.
my face out of here.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for having me, and thank you, everybody. It's great to see you. My name's Jeff Olson. I'm the Art Education Director for Royal Talens North America. Have a paintbrush, will travel. A job I've had now since 2017, Emmy, but I've been in the industry for more than 20 years now. I have an MFA in painting and drawing, and I taught university studio art and art history for about a decade. A little bit about Royal Talens before I jump into this for those folks who don't know who we are. We are a Dutch manufacturer of artist materials, established in 1899 in a little village called Apeldoorn, about an hour east of Amsterdam by train. I'm not making that name up. That is a real name, Apeldoorn. A beautiful little town, and we've been the same piece of real estate since the very beginning. We make products that you probably know, like Rembrandt, oil paint, watercolor, soft pastels, of course, the Amsterdam Acrylic series that we're going to be talking about today, Ecolina, our liquid watercolors, Van Gogh, everything Van Gogh we make, Cobra water mixable oils, and the list goes on. So many, many brands underneath the Royal Talens umbrella. So with that, I'm going to do two things today. First, I have a presentation to share with you. And I realized, and Emmy and I were talking about this, we did a very similar topic. We talked about Amsterdam Expert about a year ago. So I mixed it up a little bit. So if you saw that show recently, or if you saw it when we did it live, I have added some new stuff, some new images, some new information. So even though there will be some review, there will be some new things for you to see as well. I'm going to do a quick PowerPoint presentation. And then we're going to split it up, and I'm going to do a demonstration of the product at the end. So with that, let me go ahead and share my screen, and you're going to see my presentation here in just a second. How's that look, Emmy? Good?
Looks good.
All right, perfect. So Amsterdam All Acrylics, specifically the Expert Series. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So in Amsterdam, we have an Expert Series and a Standard Series. Standard is by far the most popular. We sell Standard everywhere. It's a wonderful paint. It's what I call an artist grade paint. Everyone from students to professionals use it. But Expert is our pinnacle. Expert is the very best acrylic that we manufacture under the Amsterdam label. It has high pigment loads, high viscosity, just a wonderful heavy-bodied acrylic paint, equal to any other paint that's out there on the market. So I wanted to focus specifically on this today. And it's my favorite because it's what I use. I don't know if you noticed in the picture behind me, but lots of Amsterdam Expert behind me. And it's what I use in my studio for my work every day. So let's go ahead and take a look here. Oh, what's going on? No. Forwarding. Let's try that. There we go. All right. So first, we're going to have a brief history, because acrylic, it's the baby of art materials. You know, many of the materials we use have been unchanged for thousands of years, but acrylics are a product of the 20th century. So I'm going to talk a little bit about their brief history very briefly. And then we're going to get into some of the artists who made acrylic their primary medium and helped to make it popular worldwide. Then we're going to define the binder. And it's the binder, and this is really important for all mediums. It's the binder that gives every medium its specific working property. All the pigments are the same. So we use the same coloring agents in oil paint that we do in watercolor and acrylic. It's the binder that makes each of these different materials unique. So we'll talk about what it is, what is special about the acrylic binder. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the specific features and qualities of the Amsterdam Expert line. And then I'm going to share with you some techniques, both on slide form. So I'm going to show you some images, different artists' work. And then we're going to jump into the demo. And the demo, I'm going to do a little test for you that's going to show you the tinting strength of the paint. And then I'm going to show you one of the techniques that we're going to see in some of the images as well. That's really fun. And I can't wait to get to that part. All right, so acrylic in the beginning. So like I said, it's the baby of artist materials. Acrylic, the first acrylic polymer resin that was patented was in the 1930s by a gentleman named Otto Rome. And this is the dapper chemist here himself when he was a young man. He is responsible for several inventions. He started his career in chemistry perfecting a type of material that made it easier to dye leathers, and went on to form a company called Rohm and Haas, and together they ended up developing and patenting plexiglass. And there was a real boom in the industry and a real perfect timing, if you will, in terms of the use of plexiglass during World War II. It was used, and you see the picture here of the nose of all those bombers that were being produced in the US during World War II. So it was the right material at the right time for a lot of different reasons. But plexiglass now has gone on to be a very common material that's used in many different ways. And acrylic paints are actually, the binder is related to plexiglass, and I'll talk about that a little bit further in the presentation. As a painting material, it didn't take long after the patent of it to make its way into the studio of artists. The first acrylic paint was something called Magna, and we see it here. The inventor is pictured here too, Becour. These first acrylic paints were very different than what we use today. They were prepared from pigments that were dispersed or brought to emulsion in a solvent, specifically mineral spirits. So it was still a solvent-based paint, but it did have the working properties, for the most part, that we're familiar with in terms of acrylic paint. It would dry very rapidly to a very nice hard matte finish. It was a non-yellowing paint film, easier to use in a lot of ways than oil paints. And it caught on right away with several different groups of artists. But the first acrylic painters to really embrace the new material were the Mexican muralists, artists like Diego Rivera, Jose Orozco, and specifically David Securos. And this is a painting, a self-portrait by David Securos. Here's a picture of him that he used modeling his fist for this very painting. But he was a real champion for it. All these artists were based in Mexico, although they did spend a lot of time in the US in the 1930s and on. They came up during the WPA Works projects and shared their skills and expertise with a whole generation of American painters. So really important figures to American painting in the 20th century. But they adopted these new materials and made them their own, so to speak. And I love this quote by Securos here that I'm going to share with you. There is as much difference between acrylic and other mediums as there is between the burro and the jet-propelled motor. So you can see his enthusiasm for this new material. One thing to really keep in mind why it was so exciting for them is they were muralists. They were working on large scale. Often these murals were outside. So the new paint really lent itself to that type of work. In the 1950s, we have another major innovation. Rohm and Haas again, Otto Rome, patented and created something called Roplex AC33. This was after World War II. All the GIs were coming back with their GI bills, and we see a housing boom in the 1950s, and Roplex was right on the spot. It's the first acrylic polymer emulsion that was brought to emulsion in water. So it was much easier to work with. It had all those wonderful rapid drying qualities of the previous type of acrylics, and it just made it really easy on a commercial end to paint with, interior, exterior of homes. You could literally be moving in the day after you finish painting, and that's what this picture is alluding to. So a real revolution in commercial paint. And of course, it didn't take long for artist paint manufacturers to jump on, and one of the first acrylic paints was developed in Mexico City called Polytech. By a gentleman named Jose Gutierrez, and Securos, who I mentioned earlier, actually wrote the foreword of a book that he published on one of the first books on acrylic painting techniques. So a real interesting bit of history there. Polytech is still manufactured today. A couple other paints that you might be familiar with that also followed shortly after. There's a gentleman named Levinson in Cincinnati who created another one called Liquitex. And then Beaucourt's partner and an entrepreneur and innovator and revolutionary in acrylic painting, Sam Golden, created something called Aquatech in the 1950s. Of course, that lent and ended up becoming Golden Paints, probably the premier acrylic paint line out there today. But all of that happened in this one decade and really revolutionized painting from that point forward. There were many artists who started to look at acrylic for different reasons. The pop artists like Roy Lichtenstein, pictured here, embraced the new acrylics for a couple different reasons. One, they liked the look of it. They were mining commercial art, in this case for Lichtenstein, comic books, and so acrylic paints kind of had the look of commercial art. And also for the images that they were looking at. So acrylic paint really fit into the content. Roy Lichtenstein was actually an early advocate for acrylic paints. That first one I showed, Magna Paint, he loved that so much so that when they stopped making it in favor of the water emulsion version, he actually, the story is anyways, that he went all over Manhattan and New York City to every art supply store there was to buy up all of the Magna paint that they had left. That's how much he was invested in it. The next group of artists who embraced the paint were the second generation abstract expressionists, the color field painters, Helen Frankenthaler being preeminent amongst them. They used some of the qualities of the acrylic paint, exploited them to create these wonderful veils of color in a technique called staining. So in this image here, in many of her paintings, she is literally staining the canvas directly, an unprimed canvas, with the acrylic paint. You couldn't do that with oil paint. Oil paint, of course, is corrosive to the canvas. That's why you need to size it, and you need to put on gesso to protect it over time. So this is really something that is unique to acrylic. So acrylic paint and Helen Frankenthaler combined to make this technique possible. And this is the technique that we're going to explore in our demo today. Another group of artists in the next decade, in the 1970s, for different reasons, jumped on the bandwagon of acrylic paint. The photorealists were using it. The versatility of the paint allowed them to use airbrush techniques and create these hyper-realistic images on a really large scale. And you can see some examples of her work here. Audrey Flack was preeminent, but there were others also using this technique in the 1970s, create these really wonderful detailed images. Today, we still have artists who are using acrylics in their work. Carrie James Marshall, one of the preeminent painters today, uses acrylics in combination with collage techniques. So really exploiting one of the big benefits of acrylics is the strongest adhesive in terms of its binder. So you can work with a variety of materials and collage techniques, and he does so with great effect in this work. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this acrylic binder. So what makes it so unique, so different? So a couple things first, and that is just talking about the word, where it comes from. The term actually dates back to the mid 19th century, 1840s, I think it was. It was a chemical compound, anything containing acryl, and that word is related to the term acrid, which is based on the Greek word akros, which is anything that has a peak or an extreme. Acrid, you're probably familiar with anything with that acrid smell or taste, right? That acidic kind of a taste. So that's where the term was first used, acrylic, any combination of chemical compounds that gave off that kind of acrylic acidic odor. Over time, it was perfected, and I mentioned Otto Röhm in the 1930s patented the first acrylic resin. So let's break down this term, acrylic polymer emulsion. So the acrylics themselves are a group of thermoplastics. So they are a plastic, but not all plastics are acrylic. So they are unique. More specifically, they're referred to as a polymethyl acrylate or a polyacrylate. Acrylic is really outstanding in terms of its strength compared to other plastics, but what's really most important is its optical clarity. So you can see it when it's fluid, it's milky white, and if anybody out there has been painting with acrylic mediums, you're familiar with this, but it dries completely clear. And the level of clarity is very, very high, so it enables us to see the true color of the pigment in a wonderful way. It's very luminescent. And it's one of the benefits of acrylic paint in terms of comparison to other mediums. It doesn't discolor over time either. So it's really wonderful, and I'll talk more about that. The next term in there is polymer, and this is just a generic term. It refers to the molecule itself. Polymers are large molecules that are composed of many repeating subunits. Polymers are an essential part of everyday life. They're synthetic and organic polymers out there. DNA in our body is a type of polymer. So it's just referring to the structure of the acrylic. And then finally, emulsion, and this is really important. I mentioned that the early acrylics were solvent-based, so they were brought to emulsion with a solvent. Today, we have water-based emulsion acrylic paint. And an emulsion is simply putting two things together that don't usually mix, like oil and water, and adding another ingredient that holds them together. In Latin, emulsion means to milk. And milk itself is technically an emulsion. It's a combination of fat and water. Other examples in nature are mayonnaise, of course, vinaigrettes, anything that you buy at the grocery store that's in a can or a jar typically has some type of emulsifier in it, holding all the ingredients together. So in acrylics, there's a type of surfactant that's added to the mix that holds this acrylic polymer together with the water in a state of emulsion in the tube of paint. So acrylic polymer emulsion, that's the binder. All right, some of the advantages of using acrylic resins as a binder in your paint. You have greater resistance to moisture. So where other types of paint films, including oil paints, have some vulnerability in terms of moisture, acrylic is very resistant to it. Regardless of where the moisture is coming from, whether it's in the air or direct application, it has a strong resistance to it. One of the reasons why it's great for murals outside. It has better adhesion than any other binder. Acrylic is an excellent glue. So there are lots of natural glues, organic glues that have been used over the years, centuries really, in art making as binders. For oils, we use a drying oil called linseed oil. For watercolor, we use a tree resin, gum arabic. They're all great binders and have some unique features that make them special, but none of them are as good as adhesive as an acrylic resin. They have superior resistance to blistering and cracking. Again, this makes them unique amongst a lot of other mediums. Gouache, if you've ever used that, super sensitive. The oil paint over time can crack. It's really sensitive, again, to shifts in its ground. Moisture also affects it. But acrylics really resist that. Super strong paint film. They're non-yellowing. They aren't going to change over time. So that clarity that I mentioned is going to stay with the paint for decades. They're also alkali resistant. This is one of the main reasons they're great for outdoor use and murals, for example. The acids that are in the environment, in the air, are resisted by the acrylic polymer resin emulsion, so that you don't have any of the aging as a result. So they're an excellent paint to be used in murals or outdoors. They also resist it in a lot of surfaces too, like concrete, and I'll talk about that later. So they're VOC-free, volatile organic compounds, so there are no toxic odors that are coming off of acrylics or acrylic mediums, so this is great news. And we have a very special proprietary method, 100% acrylic resin that's virtually odorless as well. So no toxic odors coming up off of acrylic paints. So Amsterdam Expert. So what are some of the things that make it unique, make it special? So we've got the 100% acrylic polymer emulsion binder that I just mentioned, superior pigmentation, heavy bodied. If you like texture, you like the brush marks, there's a great texture, great consistency in the paint. The milling is extra fine grind, and I'll talk about all these more. Excellent light fast rating, excellent light fast rating across the line. It includes artist exclusive colors, and we'll talk a little bit about the depth of the range and series as well. So first, let's talk about pigmentation. So what we do with the Expert that's unique for the other paints compared to standard, for example, or the Talens Art Creation, is we use the critical pigment volume, CPVC it's called, and it's the highest pigment concentration that can be achieved in the paint to maintain that balance between the binder and the pigment in terms of the pigment's absorption. So lots and lots of pigment in these paints. And it gives great color. We use only the highest quality pigments. These bags are actually a picture from our facility, and it doesn't do them justice. When you're there in person, they literally glow. It's like there's a light inside the bag shining out of it. You expect like music to come up when you start looking in these bags in the background. So only high quality pigments are used, as well as some exclusive colors, and we'll talk about that in a minute. On that picture in the inset too was the process where the pigments are mixed with the wet media. Next, we have the consistency of the paint. Amsterdam Expert is a heavy-bodied acrylic. So compared to our Amsterdam Standard, which is more of a soft body acrylic, the Expert is heavy body. So for those folks who really like a lot of texture, who like to use a palette knife, for example, or like to build up the surface, the Expert can lend itself to that more effectively than some other paints out there, including the Amsterdam Standard. There are benefits to soft body paints as well. They thin out and are really creamy, but the heavy body gives you a little more versatility, and that's something I like about it in the layering that I do. One other thing that I like about it is there's less mass shift or shrinkage. Soft body paints and most acrylic paints, actually all acrylic paints, have some type of shrinkage or mass shift, but heavy body paints like the Amsterdam Expert exhibit less of this. So the marks you make with your brush are going to be retained even after the paint dries. So the extra fine grind, I mentioned this before. What we're talking about there is how many times and how much the paint is milled. So you can see the mill in the background there. The milling of extra fine professional range is up to 10 hours on the mill they spend. They can go through the mill up to 5 times. Each time those rollers that you see in the picture are recalibrated to be a little bit closer together, grinding the pigments down even smaller, but most importantly, dispersing them more effectively. So you can mix them like you saw in that big picture in that giant KitchenAid mixer, but it's really the milling that makes the difference in terms of pigment dispersal. And that really means a lot when we're talking about not only the tinting strength of the paint, but the luminosity, the ability to reflect light. The way that we gauge that is with this little tool here. It's called a Hegman bar, and you can see how the paint is drawn through the Hegman bar. And what the technician does, or I should say artisan does, is they look at it with the human eye, with the naked eye, and where they can see imperfections in that bead of paint, they measure it in a measurement called microns to determine how well and finely grind it has been. If it doesn't meet the standard, then it'll go back to the mill and go through again. Once they're signed off on it, it goes into the lab, of course, and they measure it with computer optics. But these guys are right almost all the time. It's just incredible the level of experience and skill that goes into the making of paint in the Amsterdam, across the Royal Talens line for that matter. All right, light fastness. I mentioned the light fastness being excellent. You can see in the little yellow circle where the light fast indication is on the tube. Those 3+ signs are a symbol that we use for excellent light fast rating. That's 100+ years under museum light conditions. That's the best light fast rating that pigments can get. 2+ signs is 25 to 100 years light fast. That's considered good. 1+ sign is 10 to 25 years. That's considered fair. And 0 is what we call fugitive. So if a little 0 is on there, that means it's not light fast. None of the Expert have those. Matter of fact, the standard line only has a couple colors that are fugitive, and those are the reflex colors, the neon colors, and those are dye-based colors, so they are not light fast. All the rest of the ones in the line are, and all of the Expert series are 100% excellent, 100+ years light fast paint. Exclusive colors. So what do I mean by exclusive colors? I'm talking about those colors that are used exclusively in the making of artist materials, colors like the cadmiums and the cobalts. And you can see here that we have several of those exclusive colors in the line. That's really a distinguishing factor in a professional line versus a student line. Almost all student lines exclude these colors, and in their place we'll have a hue, for example, which is two different pigments that are mixed together to simulate the exclusive color, or they will have these pigments but at a much lower ratio in the paint, but most often they're not included at all. So if you see these true pigments in a line like the Expert series, you know that you're working with a professional paint. Here's the full color range. This includes the Amsterdam Expert series, and then you can compare that to the Talens Art Creation, where there are only 38 colors. We are unique. Amsterdam Standard Series, we have 90 colors, plus there are specialty colors in addition to that. That's really our largest line and our most popular acrylic line. The Expert Series has 70 colors, but is growing over time. We're looking at adding some more, as well as some larger sizes being available in North America, which I'm really excited about too. All right, so what do we mean by series? Some of you folks know what this is, but for those of you who don't, you'll be standing in front of the paint rack and you'll see different prices for different series. And what this is referencing is the exclusivity of the pigment in the tube. The quality of a series 1, 2, 3, 4, in this case, is all the same. The pigment quality is the same. The difference is the exclusivity. So how expensive is the pigment to source? How expensive is it to manufacture? And that's what contributes to the cost of it and the ranking as a different series. And you can see in the Expert line, we have 9 of those. Actually, there are 10 of those now, of the series 4, 31 of the series 3, 26 of series 2. So the bulk of the colors are in that 2, 3 range. And then we have 4 series 1, which are the whites, blacks, and a couple of the earth tones. All right, techniques is our kind of segue into our demo today. So acrylics have incredible versatility. It's what's made them the #1 paint used around the globe today, far exceeding even the folks in second place. Almost everybody is using acrylic paint somewhere in practice, especially in academic settings, because of its ease of use and, of course, its versatility. Some of the techniques that acrylics really lend themselves to: layering, including glazing, are really easily achieved with acrylics. They dry very quickly, so it's easy to build up your surface. Hard edge techniques, again, are very easy to achieve with acrylics, whether you're masking or using stencils. Again, the dry time contributes to this, as well as the paint's consistency. Collage techniques are wonderful with acrylics. Remember, I mentioned what a good adhesive they are, so you can collage almost anything into an acrylic painting. Really wonderful for that. Washes, so you can simulate watercolor techniques by wetting the surface of paper or of a canvas and then adding the paint into it and creating some of those wonderful bleeds and stains, bleeds and blooms. And then finally, staining. And staining is very distinct from washes, and it's really about the preparation of the surface. And that's what we're going to focus on today in the demonstration. I'm going to show you how to prepare and stain using acrylic paints on canvas. Some of the other things I wanted to mention before we get to that, though, auxiliaries, which are the mediums, are a great thing to try out. There are a variety of them out there, and they've really expanded the vocabulary of acrylic painting. Everything from just your general mediums like matte and gloss mediums, to gels, to paste, to pumice, to crackling medium, to pouring medium, and the list just goes on and on and on. There are so many different mediums out there that you can use to enhance or alter the working properties of the paint. They're also great with any other types of water media. You can mix them interchangeably with those to great effect. And then I mentioned briefly the amount of surfaces is almost infinite. The really only thing that you can't paint on with acrylics is anything that has oil or too much dust or debris on it, something that would prevent it from getting its hooks in or making a solid bond with the ground. So almost anything, canvas, wood panels, metal, brick, mortar, you name it, you can paint on it with acrylics. Want to show you some of the different techniques real quickly before we get to the demo. Here's an example of layering both opaque and transparent, and there's some texture in there as well. I did this demo a couple of years ago. Acrylics are just really wonderful for layering. This is what I do in my studio. I'm putting one layer upon the next in rapid succession, taking advantage of broken color to create interesting transitions from one shape to the next. Layering techniques is just super fun in a lot of different ways. You can use this technique to achieve different results. Hard edge, this is a painting that I've been working on recently, actually a commission painting, but I use a combination of masking techniques and a really big palette knife to create straight edges or hard edges, and acrylics really lend themselves to this too. The fact that they dry quickly allows you to mask over and over again, especially the Expert series with its consistency allows you with a palette knife to create really sharp edges and marks as well. Here's one of Kerry James Marshall's painting, an example of collage. You can see where he's papered many areas in there and then gone back over those with paint and creating different layers of materials on the surface of the canvas, creating more interest, just exploiting that versatility of the material in a wonderful way to tell a wonderful narrative. Washes, I mentioned this is the watercolor technique. So you're literally painting into a wet surface. You can create these wonderful watercolor type techniques with the difference that when this dries, you can actually paint over it without any lifting. So that's a really fun feature of working with acrylic in this way that differs from working with watercolor. And then finally, staining. And this is another example from Helen Frankenthaler. The staining technique is unique, and you can kind of see her doing it in this inset. She is pouring the paint on. She used to use mops and these giant brushes to push it around as well. We're going to do it on a much smaller scale. But one of the differences in the results of staining it is the way that the paint bonds with the canvas. And you can see too, in these wonderful edges that you get in staining techniques. Think of putting a cup of coffee down on a piece of paper coaster and it stains it if it spills onto it. The same kind of effect. So a little different than what you would experience with a wash. Also in the way that the paint bonds with the canvas is unique and really fun as a point of departure, even not just a finished result. So we're going to work on some staining today. First, we're going to test the tinting strength of the paint. I'm going to show you the amount of pigment and how that extra fine milling lends to the tinting strength of these colors. And then we're going to jump into the staining technique. So that is the end of that. And I think I made my time. Yay! 3 minutes over, not too bad.
All right. It was a lot of information, and I hope everybody watching was listening and paying attention, because we did mention it in the chat there. But you know, you like to give away items for these shows.
I got some goodies. We're going to be giving away a set of the Expert paint. It's a 12 tube set. And we have these super cool acrylic painting journals. It's a very special acrylic paper. This is synthetic paper in a big black hardcover book, 12 by 16 inches. So we're going to give those two things away to one lucky winner out there.
Which is ironic because we actually had somebody in the comments asking about surfaces, specifically sketchbooks for acrylic paints. So that is just absolutely perfect timing, and I'm very excited. So everybody do pay attention to the demo, because Jeff's going to have an amazing demonstration and I'm very excited to see it. But the giveaway is going to be at the end, correct?
Giveaway at the end. So it's always based on something that was in the presentation. So for those of you who are taking notes, you're going to be on this. So
that's why we mentioned it in the comments. But you know, you can always watch it back later. But you know, for right now, let's get into this demo, because I'm so excited, and our chat just went absolutely nuts, going yay! So
yay.
they're excited.
Right. We're in business, it looks like. Okay, so I wanted to start off today showing you how much color is in the Amsterdam Expert. There's just tons of wonderful color in these paints. And one thing too on this, let me see if I can get this up there without zooming out. There we go, no reflection there. So I showed you with the 3+ signs, that's the excellent light fast. One thing I didn't talk about was that little square. And there are different things that you can see there. There are 4 different symbols actually. You can see here it's a solid square and here's an empty one. This is talking about the opacity or transparency. This symbol here, the black square, that's an opaque color. So this cadmium is an opaque color. This ultramarine is a completely transparent color. There we go, veering off to the side there. So that's the transparent. There are 2 things in between. There's a semi-transparent that actually has a little line through the middle of the square, and a semi-opaque, which is half black and half white. So there's either transparent, semi-transparent, semi-opaque, or opaque. So that's what that little symbol means. So what we're going to do in this first part is just real simply mix the colors to show you the tinting strength of the paint. I mentioned why it has it. One, it's got lots of pigment in it. The other thing is the milling. So this is an extra fine mill. This is just our standard fine milling. So this paint just goes through the mill a couple times. This is the Talens Art Creation. This is a great student grade paint, wonderful color, a great economic choice for painting. I'm going to go ahead and squeeze a little bit of it out onto the surface there. Set that aside. And then we're going to put the Expert next to it. More, so we're pretty close to the same amount. There we go. So there's the Expert. So the mass tone of these is really similar, right? So when you put it out onto the surface, the color right out of the tube is something we refer to as mass tone. So it looks really very much alike. When I put my brush into it, you can see how this is a real soft, easy to manipulate paint. Doesn't really hold the peaks really well, and I'm going to hold this palette up. Here we see a much richer, thicker paint.
Oh yeah, you can really tell a difference there.
Yeah, and so if I hold it up, you can kind of see how
Wow.
There's a significant difference in that. The Talens Art Creation is no slouch. It's a fun paint to work with, but this is a much heavier bodied, more densely pigmented paint. But
It looks like it just leveled out just a little bit though.
Yeah, and you can kind of see how it's starting to level out around the edge here. A bit, and that will continue to happen. Acrylic paints dry through evaporation, so there's water in the paint that evaporates out and leaves the acrylic polymer on the surface to bond to create the paint film. Because it's evaporating, it's losing volume, and it actually reduces, or what we call mass shift, not just in color, but it's a type of shrinkage that occurs, and you lose a little bit of the edge of your marks, and that's where the heavy body paint really is nice. So mass tone, real similar. So now let's do a small amount of white, just a little bit here. This is not scientific, but close to amount. I want to make sure I err on putting more there. So pretty close to the same amount there. Now we're going to do the same thing here. I want to get pretty close to the same amount of the paint. If I have more anywhere, I want to have a little more on this side. So this is where you really see the difference. Student grade paints are used a lot by professionals too, especially if you're not mixing colors, covering large surfaces, working on an underpainting. The mass tone, the quality of the pigment is there. The mass tone isn't bad either. You see a lot of similarity there, right? So they really lend themselves to that. But when you start mixing colors, that's where you really see the difference. So here we've got the Expert, mixing it with that titanium white. I'm going to show that again. I'm using the Expert for both, so it's the same white, and that's important for the test. So even with a 1-to-1 ratio, we get a nice blue color. It doesn't get washed out. There's just lots of pigment in there, and you can see how quickly it mixes too. I love that. Again, that's part of the milling. Now let's go ahead and mix the art creation. You see the difference already?
Already. It is insane how much that really does
It's not
make
a bad
quite a
color,
difference.
but
No,
not,
it's beautiful still.
yeah.
But that would explain why, like, we had somebody in the comments saying, you know, I can tell instantly now why my colors weren't so brilliant, because if your pigment quality is just not there, you know, or the quantity especially, you know,
Yeah.
it's gonna make a difference.
It can be a matter of economics too. You know, if you're going to be mixing a lot of colors, sometimes it makes more sense to spend the extra money and get the professional paint, because you use less of it
Mhm.
to create the color. To get this same comparison, I'm going to have to add in almost all that paint
Mhm.
to get to where I'm close to that same thing. So when you're mixing a lot of colors, you're looking for nuance, you're looking for strength in your color mixes, vibrancy. You really want to think about upgrading to the professional level. All right, so that's the tinting test. Now we're going to do some staining with the technique. And this technique, I got one that I already kind of prepared here. This I did earlier. The pigment loads and the milling is important for a technique like this as well, because we're diluting the paint with a lot of water. We're adding a lot of water to create this effect. And the less pigment that's in the paint, the less brilliance you're going to have in the color. So having a lot of pigment, having a professional grade paint is really important to get good results with a staining technique. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So I've just got a little piece of canvas here. I also have some big brushes, and I've got some little paper cups that I'm going to be mixing paints in, and then I've got some buckets of water. I've got 3 of them over here on the side. I also have a rag that I'm going to be using today to do this. All right, first things first. So when you buy canvas, this is unprimed. When you buy canvas raw from the store, it still includes sizing in it. Sizing is used to control the absorbency, maintain the adhesion, lots of different reasons in there. And the result, though, if you try to put water on a surface like this, is you get beading. And I don't know how well you can see that. I'll lift it up here. You can see how the water just beads up.
Oh yeah.
So if we tried to stain this surface as it is, we'd have a lot of problems. The paint would just bead up, and so we'd really be fighting that surface. So what I like to do for this technique get started is to remove the sizing, and it's really easily done. All you need is a rag and some water. You can do this with a brush too. You can brush water on. Matter of fact, I'll do that as well. So you can just brush the water on. Look at, you can see it bead up there.
Yep.
So I can get the water on the surface there. And I just work it in. This is very similar to what watercolor artists do sometimes, or printmakers do sometimes, removing sizing from their papers. And just a little tip when doing this, and I've watched other folks do this before, they work on a piece of raw canvas and it starts to wrinkle up really bad when they start to add water to it. It's just like when you stretch a canvas, right? You put the canvas on the stretcher bars, you start to add water or your paint on it or your gesso, and it shrinks up. Well, that has the same desire here. So one thing I do to prevent that is to go ahead and gesso the other side of it. So just a tip, it's still going to have a little bit of reaction to it, but not as much. It'll be much easier to control. So I just put on a couple coats of gesso on the back of this before I got started today. You can see I'm kind of coming up on the edges a little bit, but if I did this to a piece of canvas that wasn't gessoed on the back, I would end up with a really wrinkled, and wherever the water hit first, it's going to tighten up a little quicker, lots of distortion in the surface. All right, so now if I add some water to the surface real quick, it immediately soaked in. See that? Soaked right into the surface. So we could begin staining on this wet surface now. But if we're going to stay true to Helen Frankenthaler, what we want to do is let this dry. And so I've got one prepared here already. This one I removed the sizing from, and it's ready to go. So now we can mix some paint.
Now, while you're mixing up the paint, we did have one question. So when you're stretching watercolor paper, right, you usually want to like tack the edges down to where it kind of will stay where it needs to be. Would you recommend trying to?
You could certainly do that. Yeah, you could staple this down to a board.
Or like push pins or something. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the bigger the piece, it depends. You know, you look at Helen Frankenthaler's technique. She had those big sheets of canvas right off the roll laying on the floor of her studio that she's working directly on. And she doesn't have any kind of tacking or taping that I can see. Maybe she has something underneath it, some carpet tape or something holding it to the floor. So you could do that. I could tape this down, but it's going to level out. This is one I wet earlier today, and you can see that it's, you know, nice in terms of its shape. So even if you get a little rolling, doing that gesso on the backside is help prevent a lot of that from happening. All right, so let's mix the paint. So I've got some paper cups here, and I've got my paint. Just one tip here, we're working with transparent colors. So just like with watercolors, it's usually better to start with your lightest value first and work towards your darkest value. So with that in mind, I'm going to start with this yellow. This is a cad yellow lemon. And I'm going to put a little bit of that paint in the bottom of the cup. You can see it there, a little bit right there.
Yep.
Then I'm going to add some water. And so inevitably I get a question, how much water?
Yep. I was going to say that's immediately going to be the question.
there historically has been a lot of conflicting information about how much water you can add to acrylic paint and it still be good in terms of maintaining its integrity as a binder. But the old form, I think it was 1-to-1. Somebody would say you had to do 1-to-1, and that was communicated, and that's certainly a very conservative approach to ensure that you're going to have good binding. But folks have revisited that. We're not the only ones. Golden actually has an excellent article on their Just Paint site about this. But what they say is their general recommendation is as much as 10-to-1, and that's what I'm going to kind of do here. You can kind of see the amount of water I have. It's probably not even 10-to-1. It's probably 7, maybe even 5-to-1. But a lot of water compared to the amount of paint that's in there. They went on to determine that you could go as high as 100-to-1 ratio and still not have any issues, depending on the pigment. Some pigments are more staining than others. So it really depends on the pigment that you're working with. So I'm just mixing it thoroughly. I've got a little stencil brush here. I like the flat bottom to these for mixing the paints. And you can see I've got a very, very fluid mixture. I can always add more water to this. That'll give me more transparent color. Less water than what I added will give me more opacity. So you can play with that to determine how much color you want to lay down at any given time. All right, so I've got it mixed. So different ways we can apply this. You saw in the picture, Helen Frankenthaler was pouring it on, so we can pour some of this paint on directly on the surface. I like to brush it on too. So I'm going to drag the paint on. You can see how it's puddling, but it's not beating up. Nice. And when you pour it on, you get a lot more volume on there too than you might otherwise. I'm doing my best to channel Helen Frankenthaler here.
Amazing that even with that amount of water, that color is still so
vibrant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's really a testament to the amount of pigment that is in the Expert paint. So I've got a lot of paint on there. I'm going to go ahead and let some of this drip down and get some fun marks like that too.
Nice.
All right. So there's my first coat. Next, I'm going to do the red. So I'm going to get my red and I'm going to put it in the cup. Just a little dab will do ya. Add my water. You see, I'm not measuring this out. There's no need to be that specific. That's something that you can play with on your own to decide where you want to be. And I'll probably add a couple coats today. So you can see I'm mixing it in there. Really, really fluid, right?
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of watercolor at this point.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very different feel. I mean, if you've ever painted watercolor on like Reeves BFK or Stonehenge, it's very similar to that. The absorbency of the paper is of the canvas is really a unique feel.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be trying this later on. Go home and grab all my canvas and my acrylics.
All right.
Oh, wow. Still, again, so vibrant. It's insane.
You can see where I hit the edge of that yellow.
Oh, yeah. That's beautiful. I love when it flows down.
A little bit more up here.
Now, we do have a question about this. How long does it take to dry?
Depends on how much water you add, but it can dry pretty rapidly. You'd be surprised. The absorbency of the canvas is a big part of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can
And I guess
the touch pretty quickly.
now along the same lines, would you be able to use like a hair dryer on it without having any kind of cracking issues? Yeah.
Absolutely. I happen to have one here.
Ooh.
Ta-da!
Nice. Very well loved.
All right. I'm not going to use it though. But yeah, you could manipulate the surface with a hairdryer and do some really fun things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So many different opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, just to remind the people who are watching, in case they didn't, or they just jumped in or have just started watching, what you're using is actually not paper; it's raw canvas.
Raw canvas. Yeah, raw canvas.
And you
get it closer. You can see the texture of it there. And I've gessoed the back side of it. And I'm spilling onto it.
It's a secondary painting, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's my blue paint in the bottom, just a little dabble, do you?
Mm-hmm.
Add some water. See how much water is in there?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to mix that together.
Very primary painting. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So I'm going to pour again. Get a smaller brush this time. Oh, look at it go.
Yep, it is flying up. I mean, water is going to take that path of least resistance. So into the wet areas is the easiest way for it to go. But it's just lovely when the colors start mixing. Now we do have a question here. Just to confirm, that is a cotton canvas, not linen.
Cotton duck is correct. Yeah.
Yep. And someone was asking
with acrylics. Yeah.
Yeah. I have another question here. They're asking if it would work on heavyweight watercolor paper.
Yes. Yeah, you could do this on paper too.
And I mean, I would have guessed that like it doesn't really make any difference on whether or not you wet the watercolor paper, because like you did that initially to the canvas to remove that.
To the canvas, yeah, because you really have to do that to prevent the beading. But with watercolor paper, I mean, watercolor papers are sized internally and externally, good ones,
Mhm.
to regulate the amount of absorption. But most of them are, especially a cold press or a rough, are going to be very absorbent right off the bat. So you could do this directly on the paper without any preparation. If you want to increase the absorbency, then certainly you could wet the paper first and let it dry, and then do this technique on a piece of paper. That will displace a lot of the sizing in the paper and make it even more absorbent.
Very cool.
So then you can go back in, you can continue to add more fluid areas. I'm going to go ahead and just, well, you can also mix a variety of colors, right? I've just got this primary palette. You can get as many different colors. You can leave canvas exposed, which is something that Helen Frankenthaler did a lot. But you can go back in and just add paint again over the top of it. I'm going to go ahead and put out a little of my yellow here. And go back in and paint. And now you can see the dry brush marks and the difference in how that works.
Oh, wow. Which I think would be a really fun way of playing with it, because then you can have, since it is a heavy body paint,
Yeah.
you can have that juxtaposition of the really soft, flat, little flowy areas of the watery acrylic. And then you can have the more impasto technique with the like just straight out of the tube acrylic.
Yeah,
How
exactly.
fun.
And that change in texture really creates depth too. That's really nice. We kind of talked about that a little bit beforehand. I can also just go into this with water. I'll just get into some water, and I can go ahead while it's still wet and do a little bit of lifting, very similar to what you would do with the watercolor.
Yeah.
But this is set up more quickly. You're not going to be able to do this for too long.
Mm-hmm.
But I can soften some of the edges where the paint is still wet.
How pretty. Oh.
But there's just something that's really special and unique about a stained surface.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the paint and the canvas become one element.
Now, I have a question about how you would finish this, because it is not a stretched canvas. And then on top of that, do you varnish at the end, or what's your?
It's not required. It's not required. Yeah, I mean, acrylic is really durable, even in these consistencies, in terms of the ratio of water added to it. It's not going to be that vulnerable. Now, canvas is cotton. It's an organic material, and so over time it certainly can degrade. So a varnish of some sort would certainly prolong the life of the surface. I would recommend a matte myself. I wouldn't want to lose the special look of the stained surface. I don't know. I mean, some folks are probably familiar with Helen Frankenthaler's work, have seen her paintings in person, and they have a unique surface quality. I mean, it's like the paint is coming through the canvas from behind. It's really pretty special. So too much of a varnish or too much of a finish is going to probably compromise some of that.
Oh yeah. And then I was going to ask you, would you stretch that on stretcher bars, or would you frame it under glass, or how would you kind of display that?
I never personally like to put it under glass. You know, pastels kind of have to sometimes, but I would just stretch it or mount it flat on something. You could use an archival adhesive or an acrylic binder, PVA, and attach the canvas to a gator board or panel, and then frame that pretty easily. Or you could get a cradled board of the same dimensions and just adhere it to the surface of the board. That's
something I've done before, which I find is probably my personal favorite. Just stick it on and it's lovely. Now, we did have somebody asking, is this something that once that layer is dry, would you then go on top of it and use that as like your underpainting?
Absolutely. That was what I was just, God, they read my mind. That's
I,
exactly what I'm
I
going to
was
show you.
wondering what you're gonna
Yeah,
do.
so this one's completely dry and you can see the wonderful surface.
Yeah, it's so lovely.
It's fun in and of itself, right? It's a fun painting, but it's a great way to create an underpainting and give your work a sense of depth. So I'm going to grab a stencil here, just a random one. I'm not gonna look at- Here, I'm feeling floral today. We're gonna use a flower. There we go. We can offset it. So you can stencil over this top. I'm gonna do something I think will jump, and that'll be some white. I'm gonna get some white paint here. You love my palette?
I do love your palette. If anybody had any questions as to whether or not you do art on a regular basis, we can absolutely tell when you just squeeze the paint out onto the table. Love it.
All right, so I'm going to use the stencil brush. These are great. If you've never used a stencil brush, it helps you control and give yourself a better edge. A couple tips with this: you don't want too much paint on it,
Mm-hmm.
and then you just a lot of padding. So this white should really pop on this.
Ooh, it
Give
should,
you
because it's
an
such a dark
idea.
color.
Yeah, give you an idea of how you can use this technique as a way to create really vibrant and interesting underpaintings for other images.
Yeah. Now I did have a viewer asking about kind of figuring out a way to where we could put oil paints on top of this. Now, considering the canvas is still kind of exposed and you'd want to protect it, would you be able to maybe do like a clear gesso, or do you have another way that maybe would be better?
Clear gesso would be great, but you're absolutely right. The surface is not protected enough just to go directly over it. So you would need to put something like PVA or an acrylic binder.
Mm-hmm.
A clear gesso would be great because that'd give you better absorption for the oil paint. But yeah, you'd want to do some type of sizing over the top of it, and then you'd be good to go.
I am so excited to see how this turns out. This is gonna be so pretty. And then we also get to still do the giveaway.
We still get to do the giveaway.
Yes. Oh, look at that.
Yeah, so that just kind of pops, right?
Yeah. I mean, what's great is that you could also still let that dry and then glaze on top of it some more.
Continue to build it. Yeah.
Yes.
All about the layering, right?
Love it.
I think that is it. I think that is it.
We're
Ready for
getting close to
selection
being
and give
about
away some
out
good
of
stuff.
time too. Look at us ending almost right on time.
Oh man, it's like we've done this before.
But
all right,
we'll have that. One last thing is the giveaway.
All right.
So I will.
Here's the
We have
question.
a question.
Here's the question. So what country were the first artists from who embraced the early acrylic paint? Just the name of the country. You don't need to give me the name of the artist.
Nice. All right. So everybody, that is your question. And if you want to enter the contest of getting, and here, let me put my face back on the screen here. If you want to enter into this giveaway, all you have to do is just put the answer to Jeff's question into the chat. And then we'll be going through, and your answers are time-stamped, so I will know who's answering right away. But usually I give you about 15 minutes after we officially sign off from the show to get your answers in. So if you need to just pop back to the beginning of the show and rewatch it a little bit, you can, just to confirm your answer. But make sure you get that answer into the chat of this video before 15 minutes after we sign off, and then you will be entered into the giveaway, where I will probably be drawing your name out of a jar as of probably tomorrow or the next day, just before the end of the week. So I'm very excited. I'm a little bummed that I can't be in this and enter my name. It'll just be a bunch of little names of Emmy over and over again, right? Katie,
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I hope everybody else enjoyed it too. I love acrylics. It's my go-to medium. You can see my, there we go.
Oh.
My acrylic shelves. But it's just a wonderful paint, wonderful medium to work with, and lots of opportunities to create and explore.
It really, really is. It's such a versatile medium. And I mean, I cannot personally wait to get home and start staining all of my canvas, because I'm very much the kind of person that will be my underpainting, and then I'll kind of do more layers on top, and I'm excited. It's just the possibilities are endless. So
it is.
Thank
it's
you.
Fun too.
Thank you so much for showing us that. I am so excited to try it, as I'm sure I'm seeing our chat just kind of go a little nuts over here on the corner. I'm excited. But everybody else, thank you so much for watching. Jeff, thank you for being here. It was awesome.
Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yes, definitely. Now, of course, you guys better join us next week, because we have another amazing show planned. It will not be me. It will be Mott is hosting, and Mott is going to be showing you how to make your very own sketchbook out of watercolor paper. So if you ever were interested in doing bookbinding, and kind of how to take really wonderful watercolor paper that you love and turn that into a portable sketchbook, that's the show for you next week. So I hope you guys all will be there, and we will see you guys then. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Emmy. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jeff. Bye.